Hello. So I thought I'd make a little video about this idea of the curse of the most transferred in player. It just caught my attention. I was curious about it. So far this season, the most transferred in player each game week has blanked. And it's happened 5 game weeks in a row now. And it's been called the curse of the most transferred in player. And I was just curious to know if there's truth to it. Because I had 2 thoughts about it. Firstly, I wondered whether there's some sort of spotlight effect that might occur, where when you have a player who is playing very well, maybe the attention of the world turns on that player, creates a kind of spotlight, and they feel a certain pressure, and then they blank. Because obviously the FPL community notice, but also I'd imagine the betting community notice, the fans notice, friends and family around this player notice, their team notice, the media notice. So there's a kind of spotlight effect. And then maybe they freeze up and blank. So I thought maybe there could be a pattern in the data. So I wanted to look into the data to see if that was true. And there's this other thing that I feel sometimes, which is just hazy, superstitious thinking that I feel silly about now that I know the answer to this question. But I sometimes feel like when I'm playing FPL, to go for like the template, knee-jerky, most transferred in player, it almost feels kind of sleazy and shameful to go for. I almost feel like I have to justify it and apologise for it and stuff like, yeah, I followed the crowd, I followed the herd, and I just did this pick. Whereas if like last game week, I had this choice between Jackson, Alvarez, and Edouard. And if I had kept Jackson, that kind of felt like the patient approach. You know, his data's still good. You stick with him. You be patient. Don't knee jerk. There's a sense of like, I don't know, nobility is too strong a word, but like that's the right thing to do. Or there's players like Edouard, who's like the differential, and it would be kind of like maverick and brave to go for Edouard. And so I almost get this feeling like the FPL gods are gonna punish me for going for. This is how cults begin, obviously, but this is crazy superstitious thinking. But you get that sense, that hunch of like, because we've all seen it. Like everybody's going for Alvarez, and we all know what's going to happen. He's going to blank. Jackson's going to score. Edouard's going to score. We all kind of feel it, and it's like, why do we feel it? And is there truth to that? Is there an actual substance to that hunch? Because, well, there isn't. I looked into the data, and I'll just go into it now, which is basically that hunch is not true. I don't think so. So basically, the more a player is transferred in, the higher their points on average that they return in that game week is. That's generally the pattern over the last 7 seasons. The more a player is transferred in, the higher points they return. And the more a player is transferred in, the less likely they are to blank as well. And a blank I defined as 3 points or less. So the less likely that is to occur as well. And I kind of now that I've looked at the data, it's kind of like obvious to me. Of course, the most transferred player in is going to be the highest point scorer in general, on average, over long periods of time. And maybe some people haven't even, that they're not even thinking about this. Maybe this is obvious to some people, but I wanted to look into it anyway because I just thought there might have been something to it. And maybe other people out there were thinking it as well. Maybe some people out there are actually letting this affect their decision making, where they're thinking, oh, well, I don't want to go for the most transferred in player because it's going to sting me. It's gonna backfire on me because it's backfired so many times, and it's like it shouldn't, and it probably won't. Like, statistically speaking, the most transferred in player is usually the highest point scorer. Yeah. What do I want to tell you about? So, I mean, basically, I just went through all the seasons, found the top. Well, let's have a look at these graphs. So, this is the bottom one is all the players in the season, their average points. So this includes players who don't even play or people that are on the bench. They average about 1.3, 1.4 points. This one is positive transfers. Any player that has a positive net transfer, so one or more transfers in than out. All of these players average around about 2 points, 2.2, something like that. Then this is the next line is the top 2,000 transfers in each season. Top 2,000 most transferred players in, so it's kind of like the top 10 per game week ish. They average about 3.5 points, and then you get up to the top 100, and you get up to numbers like 4 to 5 points, and then these top two are the top 37. But this one's top 37, not including double game weeks, and this one's top 37, including the double game weeks, because obviously when you've got a double game week, the most transferred player in they've got 2 game weeks to get those points. So I just used the first game week of that double game week, just to see it's not really a proper fair test, but I just wanted to get a sense of what they would score if it was just one game week, because most game weeks are just one game week. Anyway, so, and it just goes up and up and up. There are a few like little exceptions. 17 and 18, it goes down a bit there, but that's the double game week, so it's still going up there. So technically, the herd were right there. This one maybe not. It's a little tight, but again, we're only talking about 37. The sample size is fairly small, so you might get the odd blip. But it seems to me like the overriding trend is up. It's just the more you transfer a player in, the more points they get. And that just seems that's enough for me to take that home. So I'm not worried now about transferring a player who's highly transferred in. This game week 7, is between Botman, Trippier, and Son. I think Botman's the most at the moment, but don't sweat it. I don't think there's anything to it. And this is interesting. So this is the percentage of blanks scored by the player transferred in. So what are we looking at here? So this is the percentage of times that the player transferred in blanks in that game week. And we at most, we're not talking much more than about 50%. It got down to 37.8% there, 43.2% there. So basically, even the most transferred player in, at best, as a rule of thumb, they're probably still going to blank about 50% of the time. It's 50-50. That's how often a player blanks. And even some of these players back here, the top 2,000 most transferred, the top 100, you're talking 60 to 50%. That's how often they blank when you transfer these players in. And so, in general, blanking, and I define blank as 3 points or less. 4 points or more is not a blank. So 3 points or less I define as a blank. So blanking is generally the norm, it seems. And I made this video a while ago called the troll test, and I was looking into this, and this is this is Salah's numbers. This blue line, this blue chart here, is his points each game week going back. This is from 2016 to 21, 22-ish, something like that. But basically, even Salah, who's one of the most consistent players, during his periods where he was the best FPL asset, still gets a lot of blanks. Like, blanking still happens quite a lot. There's a bunch around it. He does have some phases where he barely blanks, but there's quite a lot of blanks here. There's like huge number there. So, and I always find it interesting how these charts of players' points go up and down like that. Like, it's whenever a player hauls, it's very rare that they haul again the next game week. It seems to always go up and down. Salah's an exception where he sometimes does quite well for multiple games, but yeah. So that's about, what did I want to say about that? I think that's about it. So yeah, 50%, 50-50. So this is not that surprising, really. You do get little streaks sometimes like this where that happens. As I started going through some of the data, I mean, this is last season. This is the top 37 most transferred players in each game week, and you have little phases where there was 4 blanks in a row there. 4 blanks in a row there. There's a couple there, a couple there. It is going to happen, so it's not that surprising. So, Botman will probably be fine next game week. We'll see. What was I going to say about? I just think that hazy feeling is the bias, the psychological bias. I think is so when you've got a very highly owned player, and they blank, I feel like we notice that more because the norm, the expectation is that they won't blank, and whenever they don't blank, we don't notice it so much because we're expecting it. But we notice that time when they don't blank, when they do blank. Whereas when there are differentials who return, we notice them. We're like, oh, look at this differential over here, they've returned. But we don't notice the like hundreds of other differentials who don't return. We don't notice it. And so this narrative appears in our minds of like, oh, the highly owned player blanked and this differential player hauled, and we get this hunch, this sense, this feeling as we play FPL of like, that it's going to happen again. If I go for Alvarez, I know what's going to happen. He's going to blank, and it's going to be some random differential who's going to haul, like Edouard. Edouard's perfect. But of course, there's hundreds of differentials, and it's not necessarily going to be Edouard. And what happened last game week is actually Jackson got suspended. They all blanked, and Jackson got suspended, and Edouard pulled a hamstring. And so Alvarez didn't do much better. He did blank, but he didn't do much better either. But so, yeah, I think that's all I want to say about that. Yeah, and just trying to. I'm sure there's something I was going to say about just the up and downness of these players when they haul. They usually blank the next game week, but now I'll leave it there. Yeah, I'll leave all this data. I'll upload it so you can have a look at it if you want. Yeah, okay. See you later. Bye bye.